The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
Good morning and welcome to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host, Rebecca Miller, along with co-host Otto Lohse and radio show producer Kristina Wu. So good morning, Otto and Kristina. How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Good morning. Good to be back. I feel like it's been so long.
I know it has been, and by the time this show airs, it will be, of course, the day after Thanksgiving. So we're still recording the day before Thanksgiving. But I want to welcome our guests. This morning, we're going to be talking to the American Red Cross Service, to the Armed Forces, the Hero Care Network with Lallita Maharaj, the International Service Manager, and John McGuire, a veteran and a volunteer. So thank you both so much for joining us today and for your service, John. I'm really grateful to have you and to learn all about the American Red Cross. We have so much to talk about, but first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And we're really grateful to have you. So can you tell us a little bit about the American Red Cross Service with the Armed Forces and I guess the Hero Care Network? When we hear American Red Cross, I think everybody thinks, greater good. But what is it with the veterans? And tell us a little bit about the Hero Care Network.
Okay. So American Red Cross was founded on a battlefield. So our principles started with the concept of a battlefield. Clara Barton was tending to soldiers on the field and had her team write messages from the wounded soldiers to get those messages home to their families so that they would know, the status of that they were alive or what their progress was. So the whole concept of the Red Cross was founded from there. Service to the Armed Forces and International Services is a part of the Red Cross that focuses on active duty military veterans and their families. There's a congressional charter that states wherever the service members are, Red Cross will be there to support. So we do a lot for active duty, for veterans and their families. You mentioned the Hero Care Network. We have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week call center available to families, veterans, and active duty. If a service member is deployed and there is a family emergency at home and they needed to get that message to the command, that's where the Hero Care call center comes into play. The families would call that number. We would verify the information, create what everyone knows as the Red Cross message, find the location of where the service member is, and deliver that message to the commands. Now, commands will rely heavily on our messages, even though they don't need the message to grant leave to their soldiers. But they know that once the message comes through Red Cross, it has been verified and they can literally close their eyes and make a decision about the leave. So that's what we do for the active duty service members. We also have, myself, last year I was deployed alongside the service members when the Ukraine situation ramped up. I was deployed to Poland, Romania, and Lithuania. I was there for 10 months. So
Wow.
On an active duty base, supporting our service members there with those Red Cross messages and serving as a morale ambassador for the Red Cross, helping them, kind of keep them engaged when they're not on duty, basically. So we had a variety of ways of doing that. When I'm home stateside, we support the military installations. So there's West Point, Fort Hamilton, Fort Wadsworth, a lot of the 106 out on Long Island. So plus there's and all the smaller units that are out there. We support all the veteran hospitals, the state homes, and any veteran organization that there is. We do a lot of work with Blue Star families, and we try to fill the gap of what those organizations don't have. One of the major things we do is provide resiliency workshops to active duty, the veterans and their families, teaching coping skills, stress management. When we have a whole section for people that are coming back from deployment, we support yellow ribbons. So there's a lot that we do under a small umbrella. But a lot of people associate Red Cross with the disasters, and we do that, but we do so much more for the veterans but so I appreciate opportunities like this to educate our veteran community that the Red Cross is there as a resource to assist with whatever needs come, and we can if we can't do it, we can tap into other community resources to try to assist.
Lallita, is this all under the name of Red Cross Hero Care? Is that that covers all of it, right?
It's under Service to the Armed Forces and International Services. Hero Care falls under Service to the Armed Forces.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are other things that are provided by the Red Cross for armed forces.
Yes. There
Right.
I gave you an overview of like the major things that we do. But yes, the umbrella is Service to the Armed Forces and International Services.
One of the things that strikes me is I'm a veteran, but I go back to 1956, 57, 58 time frame. And at that time in history, every family was affected by somebody being a veteran or being in the military because we had a draft. So, a lot more people were engaged in this whole thing. And I think one of the difficulties that I see just looking from the outside in is that because we're now an all volunteer military, and we really have a very small portion of the population actually defending all of us, it would strike me as being more difficult on your side to get the veterans, the younger veterans in particular, to take advantage of the programs that exist. Is that one of your challenges?
Yes. So on the deployed sites, like when I was overseas, it was easier to get them engaged because they were there. I lived amongst them. They spent their time in our office, and we can get them engaged in different ways. Home stateside, when most of the veterans that I deal with are the population, middle age, older, but the young ones, yes, you are absolutely right. There is a challenge because the mindset of the younger service members is once they're out, they're out. They don't want to have anything to do with the military anymore. And I heard that concept over and over when I was overseas. Like they were counting the days down to how many time, and then they were done. They were going to buy their car, and they were going to hit the road basically. So yes, it's still we work with different organizations trying to tap into the veteran community. One of the things that the Red Cross is doing right now, one of the services we are working on through Fort Wadsworth and Fort Hamilton, is developing a career program. So one of my volunteers is a career counselor, and she's going to help them with their resumes, interview skills, stuff like that. So in addition to what they have through their respective branches of service, the Red Cross is providing some supplemental support as well. Just trying different ways to keep them engaged and for them to know that we're here to support them.
That's, that I like, admittedly, I know like one or two people who are veterans right now beyond my age bracket, younger people. And, it's just a different mentality and a different approach.
Yes.
And I can understand how they feel. It
Yeah.
used to be more of a social thing. People would go to the American Legion or the VFW or whatever, and they would gather and commiserate, and they'd have a lot of camaraderie. And
Yeah.
they do not have the numbers for that.
Right.
So it's, you are quite a person unto your own, by the way. I read about you, and you have lived with the veterans basically, and what their mindset is and the difficulties that they face.
Yes.
We ought to let people know a little bit about you. I know you're the mother of triplets,
Yeah.
which is
I know I was surprised when you just said so calmly. And then, when I was deployed for so
yeah.
long, I'm so curious too as to your training, because you're going into volatile situations where you're caring for, people who are active in a war zone. So, what kind of training do you have? How and how close are you to what's going on?
So by profession, I am a social worker and a crisis counselor. And when I took this job, it complemented the my I always call myself a born humanitarian. So my goal is always what can I do to help alleviate the suffering of someone else, which is what our Red Cross mission is all about. So from the beginning, I always saw myself aligned with our Red Cross mission. So it was a perfect fit for me. And as far as training, for my deployment, we're trained in casework to how to create those Red Cross messages. We have to maintain a certain amount of hours, supporting the Hero Care network, creating a case, delivering a case. How do we determine what skills to find a service member? Because sometimes a family member, they have a name, they know, oh, they're in Poland somewhere. Do you know how many pop-up bases we have all over Poland? So that was always a challenge, we become detectives to try to find that. So there's a lot of casework training for me that my social work skills allowed me to support on a deployed site and even home, because one of the type of caseworks we do in a home environment is called critical community services. And kind of what your social worker does. If a veteran has a need, a service member, we sort of tap into the resources in the community to see how we can support that. A very good example of that would be the veteran whose home the drunk driver plowed into her home in Huntington. Was it about 6 weeks ago or so? And our disaster team responded, gave her the immediate support that she needed, got her into the Montrose shelter because she was a veteran, but she works in Manhattan, and it was taking her over 3 hours to get to work. So with the train. So when our disaster team called me and told me her status and says, is there anything you guys could do for her? My social worker's hat went on, and I started reaching out to community partners and other lines of service within Red Cross to see what we can do to support her. Make a long story short, got everybody involved, the VA, the commissioner, and, other lines of service. And we were able to get her moved from Huntington to Montrose to a shelter in Brooklyn. And right now the city's working on helping find her permanent housing. So now she has a 45-minute commute as opposed to 3.5-hour commute. So
And this is because you got involved because she was a veteran?
Yes.
Right. So when you say veteran, like I go back to, a long ways now. Veterans who have been veterans for a long time still could use the services of the Red Cross?
Yes.
Right.
We have gone out to like the American Legions and do what we call get to know you briefings and explain to them the different services that we can do, which would be providing resiliency workshop, teaching coping skills, stress management. And then we also, if there's an event going on at that particular organization that we can support, we always provide what's called comfort kits, which is a Red Cross bag that has like travel size toiletries. We would usually bring those. We'd bring socks if they were having an event of some sort where they wanted Red Cross to help support that in some way, whether it's bringing some food or other items. We try to do that. And if we can't do it with the small budget we have, then we reach out to our board members to see if they can do something to support the ask of that organization.
I'm always amazed by the Red Cross in general. You mentioned the disaster teams. We have had a lot of disasters in the last couple of years. And it always amazes me how do they get this communication and how do they get all these people together so fast, which is kind of touches on your area somewhat.
Yeah.
What's the magic trick behind that whole thing?
You know what, before we get onto that, because that's such a big topic, Otto, I wanted to talk a little bit to John about his service, but we actually have to take a break. So when we come back, we'll be speaking with John McGuire, the American Red Cross Service to the Armed Forces, the Hero Care Network, also with Lallita Maharaj and John McGuire. We'll be right back. You're listening to Project Independence in You on LIU Public Radio.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
Welcome back to Project Independence in You. I'm your host, Rebecca Miller, along with co-host Otto Lohse, and of course, our radio show producer, Kristina Liu. And she's also the Director of Senior Citizen Affairs for our department, Project Independence. We're talking about the American Red Cross Services and the Armed Forces, the Hero Care Network, and we're speaking with Lallita Maharaj, the International Service Manager, and also John McGuire, a veteran and a volunteer. So, John, thank you so much for, of course, your service and your continued service volunteering. So I want to hear a little bit about, your experience as a volunteer and what continues you to stay with volunteer services with the veterans.
Well, just a couple of things. First of all, I just want to say I've worked with Lallita, and she's a phenomenal person. She's amazing, absolutely amazing, and a pleasure to work with. And she's such a dedicated person. Myself, I am an Army veteran. I was drafted into the Army in 1968, and like was mentioned before, and I did my service time, and when I went home, that was kind of in the past. I didn't do too much, but then with the first bombing of the World Trade Center, I felt that I wanted to do something. And of course, I was much older, and wasn't able to get back into the service, which but I felt that at least I could do something for our veterans, or our service members, I should say, and that was to join the American Legion. And that's how I did it. And that was many years ago. And I worked my way up. And I actually was the past commander of my American Legion post in New Hyde Park. I have a lot of respect for our veterans. And I do feel that it is a family. A veteran is part of a family. Now, as for the Red Cross, I used the Red Cross when I was in my training. I was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and my sister was getting married while I was in the service, and I was in training, and I wanted to get an emergency leave. And the only way you can really do it is through the Red Cross. So my family got in touch with the Red Cross, and I was able to get a leave to go home to my sister's wedding. Now, after that, as I say, I did belong to the American Legion. And then after I retired, I wanted to do something. And I said, well, I should say, before that, I had joined while I was still working CERT, CERT, which stands for Community Emergency Response Team, and for Nassau County. And we were kind of an emergency response in case of a major disaster. We did a lot of training, and I enjoyed doing that because it gave me the opportunity to be able to support our community if there was an emergency. But later on, I became, I retired, and I had more time. And I said, well, the Red Cross is very similar, or I should say, CERT was very similar to Red Cross. I says, let me try joining the Red Cross. And I went through the motions, and I was, while I was doing my training as a Red Cross volunteer, I found out about SAF, which is Services to the Armed Forces. And I said, you know what? I had no idea that they did this. I cannot believe it. And I looked into it, and I said, this is what I want to do, because it'll allow me to continue to both help my community and the veterans in particular. And so that's how I joined the Red Cross, the part that is for the SAF, which is support to the armed forces. I've only been a volunteer for a little over a year, so I don't have too much experience. But I can tell you that what I found out is that so many people have no idea of the services that the Red Cross gives. And I'm amazed. I've worked with Lallita. We've gone out to shelters. We've brought stuff to truly needy veterans. And Lallita has also worked getting hookups between the different organizations that are supportive to the American to the veterans, which is America, which is the VFW, the American Legion, and things like that. And she's gone, and we've made connections to help, because these are the people who know the veterans. It's so true that the veteran itself, a lot of them, they've got some terrible stories, and they keep it to themselves. But when they get to other veterans, they kind of talk. And that's the best way, I think, that we can get our services of the Red Cross out to these veterans, is through organizations like the VFW, the American Legion, and so forth. So as I say, I've worked with her. And as I say, my title right now is outreach. My position is to get in touch. And I have an in, because I've been very active in Nassau County, the Nassau County veterans, the VSA, the Veteran Service Agency, and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of an in for the Red Cross. And as I say, it's fantastic. And I'm amazed how many people, even veterans, have no idea of the fantastic services that are available to him. And again, that's my basic position as an outreach volunteer, to try to get the Red Cross information out to our needy veterans.
I'm one of those that didn't know until we got involved with this show.
True.
And I
Very
know a
true.
lot of
And
things about a lot of things.
yes.
Are you involved with the town of North Hempstead Veterans Advisory Committee at all? There's a guy, Al
Um,
Piscatelli.
no,
No,
no.
I bowl with three guys that belong to the American Legion in Carl Place. Uh,
Okay.
and Al was very involved with a lot of things. I'm going to let him know, frankly, about this whole thing.
Yeah, as I say, I've spoke to so many people. They do know the few people that were aware of the services of the Red Cross is as I used them when I was in 1968 when my sister was getting married, and that was they are the contact. They're the ones that if you need emergency relief, you need to get information out to the service members how you do it, and that's through the Red Cross. So that's basically very few people knew any more than that, as I was surprised, and that's the part that I'm trying to do to get the information out to the
Well,
to the veterans of these services.
I think that's a great goal. you
Yeah,
know,
I mean, with Project Independence, we're obviously a much smaller program, but even within the town of North Hempstead, people say, oh, they haven't heard about us. And the funny thing is yet they're using us in some capacity. And I feel like maybe that's part of it is because, like you were saying, John, they may not know all these veteran connections and services. So it's, wonderful to have you on the show. And I'm sure her brain is going, and we'd love to have you come in, speak maybe one of our senior programs to do a little in-service. And, Otto mentioned the Veterans Advisory. We also have a veterans caseworker who works for the town of North Hempstead. So, Lallita, I don't know if you know Gail Sellis, and, hopefully that's another connection that we can make. But, again, thanks, John, for your service and for volunteering. And if anyone listening to the show or if anyone watching it wants to volunteer or find out about volunteering, maybe now is a good time to just, offer the phone numbers and the websites or the best way. And if anybody listening misses it, they can always call us at 311 or 516-869-6311. And we'll be happy to connect you. So do you have any numbers offhand that would be good for people to call interested in volunteering?
Yeah, they can actually just go to redcross.org, and it's right on the main page. It says about becoming a volunteer, and it kind of asks you a couple questions as far as areas you may be interested in. And even if you're not sure, one of our volunteer services people would reach back out to you after you put your information in to kind of do a screening to see what might be a good fit for you. But if they want to specifically volunteer with us, then you can put that in your information, and then I myself would probably get in touch with you and just have a conversation to see what areas you can support. If a veteran or a family member has an issue and they needed to call the Hero Care call center, that number is 877-272-7337.
I'm sorry, 272.
272-7337. And that's a 24-hour, 7 days a week number.
Wonderful.
What like with the Red Cross Hero Care? What are the main needs that you have as far as volunteers are concerned? What functions like?
So the casework, we would train you to become a caseworker. So this can be a virtual opportunity or an in-person opportunity. I've found that veterans take care of veterans. And as John said earlier, it's easier, they will open up to another veteran. So from doing the beginning, when the journey into the military starts at Fort Hamilton, which is through the MEP station there, right? We have caseworkers to call, we have them fill out what's called the contact card. And our caseworkers reach out to the families after we've sent some information in an email to say, hey, you've had an opportunity to read the information. Can we answer any questions for you? And this is what you would do if there was an emergency. And that's just basic casework that, anyone, it doesn't take a lot of training to do that. The next level of casework would be those critical community service casework that I talked to you about earlier. And that takes maybe a little bit more training. And then another level of casework is what's called the delivery of emergency communication messages, where those emergency communication messages, those Red Cross messages that are delivered, our caseworkers would follow up on that, like after a few days after, to say, hey, did you get home okay? Is there anything else that the Red Cross can do to support you right now? So casework seems to be my biggest ask right now for volunteers. I can always use volunteers when I have community programs to do what we call tabling event. We attend these community functions and educate the public about our services, and also find out if there are needs, because in doing some of these tabling events, I find out, this veteran needs this or whatever. So then I can direct them to where to go for the specific need that they have. So I'm very active in the community. John has been a godsend to me. He's my lead volunteer on Long Island. And, sometimes, I follow his lead. He tells me about this because he lives there. I'm in Queens, he lives out on Long Island. So, and then, we have a great partnership, and, we support. So service to the armed forces, the caseworkers, and I think it also helps keeps them engaged, because a lot of what I find is a lot of the veterans, they want to do something, but they don't know what to do. And we also have different opportunities. If someone's good with technology, we have different programs we could do. They can support some of our virtual events, kind of what you guys are doing now, the technology of making sure the Zoom is running properly, monitoring the chat, just whatever services they have, we can tap into that so that we can keep them engaged and make them feel like they can continue to be part of that veteran community.
I actually downloaded your mobile app, your Red Cross Hero Care app.
Yes.
And it's pretty neat.
Yes.
It has a simple way of getting you to different areas. And not all veterans are going to be technically savvy.
Right.
But other people can help them if they're aware of the fact that I thought it was very, very well organized, and, at all age levels can give you a good path down
Yes.
different directions, really.
Exactly. And then that same service, if you're not tech savvy and to do it on your phone, that 877 number that I gave, all that can be done with the phone call as well. You can call that number and ask any of those questions, and then the caseworker will guide you to wherever you need.
Otto kind of touched on something before, and I don't know if it's really your area or not, but, talking about, so there's so much going on in the world today, the volatility of Ukraine and what's happening with Israel and all that kind of stuff, the weather. I mean, you can't get through without hearing a tornado, a hurricane, an earthquake. I mean, so much. And I assume the American Red Cross is there for all these situations. But I mean, how do you accommodate so much going on in the world, and also, helping the veterans? Have you been at a point where you're spread so thin? I mean, what is it like to staff all these different events going on?
I can speak to, I started, my journey in Red Cross started as a volunteer on the disaster side. So I was a volunteer for 4 years before I transferred over before I became staff with service to the armed forces. The Red Cross is really good at staying prepared. So we are preparing for a situation long before it happens. So we have what's called blue skies and gray skies. Gray sky is when the actual event happens, and the blue sky is everything that happens in preparation for the gray sky. So there's a lot of training going on. There's a lot of education as far as we have, there are different areas of people that keep tab on the weather and the events of the world, and then all that comes together and it gets trickles down to the different organization. As climate change is happening, things of how do we incorporate that. There's a sickle cell initiative, because that's becoming an issue more and more, that gets trickled down to the various departments so that we can support that. The Red Cross, our backbone are our volunteers. So we are constantly recruiting for volunteers and to keep them engaged. And there's so many different avenues within the Red Cross, so that when a disaster happens, we tap into those volunteers. And then if for some reason there's a shortfall, then if there's a major disaster like Sandy, when Sandy happened.
You know what? We definitely want to hear about Sandy because it had such a huge impact on Long Island, but we do have to take a very quick break.
Okay.
After break, we'll be speaking with the American Red Cross all about the services in the armed forces, the Hero Care Network with Lallita Maharaj, and also John McGuire. We'll be right back, and you're listening to Project Independence in LIU Public Radio.
WCWP is your home for great music and great conversation. You'll find all that and more on WCWP.org. Listen live on the web, check out the lineup, subscribe to podcasts, and stay up to date on the latest station events. Get in touch with us and let us know if you like what you're hearing. And find out how you can support or get involved at the only community public radio station serving Nassau's North Shore. Plus, sign up to get a free bumper sticker. It's all online at WCWP.org.
Welcome back to Project Independence in You. I'm your host, Rebecca Miller, along with our co-host, Otto Lohse, and radio show producer, Kristina Liu. You can watch Project Independence in You and Talk of the Town on North Hempstead TV, channel 18 or 65 on Optimum, or channel 46 on Verizon Fios. Also on North Shore TV. Shows usually air at 2 p.m., but you can also visit www.mynhtv.com for up-to-date schedules. You can also watch online at WCWP Studios YouTube channel or on the Project Independence website. So a lot of ways to get to watch Project Independence in You. And for more information, you can always call 311. So back to our guests from the American Red Cross Service to the Armed Forces, the Hero Care Network with Lallita Maharaj and the International Service Manager, and also John McGuire, a veteran and a volunteer. I think before break, you said, the hot topic, well, at least it was a long time ago, but still we all talk about it like it was yesterday, and that was Sandy and kind of the role that the Red Cross had taken back then. And that's kind of the most familiar thing to us Long Islanders. So yeah, this is a little out. I can tell you from a volunteer perspective, sure. But there's a lot of planning. There's a lot that goes into getting to that point of being prepared for a disaster. And when Sandy hit, we usually tap into the way it works. And you start with your local volunteers, and then the scope goes out a little bit bigger. So we would start off with the Long Island volunteers and then put an ask out to the rest of the New York region. Then it goes into the tri-state area. Then it'll go into the Northeast, ask if there's still a need for more volunteers. If it's a big disaster like how Sandy happened, then it becomes a national ask. So then the Red Cross would bring volunteers in from around the country to support the disaster that's here, which is what happened. And if it's even bigger than that, then they can go
and ask if for specific services outside of the US if they needed that. But usually, and it's all volunteer, Red Cross would tap into that. And then if you're not a Red Cross volunteer, if there's a big event like that, we have what's called community-based volunteer. So an organization or a group of people who say, hey, I want to help, like 9/11 or Sandy, then on the spot training, Red Cross, our, volunteer services team would do on the spot, a few classes or whatever to get them prepared to go out and support the disaster that's happening right there and then. So our backbones are volunteers, and it will always be.
I'm
Yeah, I
sure
mean,
that
I find it amazing that the Red Cross seems to always be there. Whenever you see some kind of disaster, they're there,
Yeah.
doing whatever they can do to help. And you know, we're not we're not in the business here of promoting charities for fundraising, but it seems like the Red Cross does a great job.
Thank you.
yeah, I have to agree. And I know that this may not be directly what we're talking about, but you did bring up Sandy and the disasters. So I don't think we cannot talk about COVID a little bit because everybody was impacted during COVID. And I'm sure that was kind of, I mean, at least in current times, an experience that even the American Red Cross, I don't want to say wasn't prepared for, because I think that's what they kind of prepare for ultimately, but really to be in that experience. And how difficult it must have been to get volunteers during that time, because it's such a scary time.
Well, one of the things I love about the Red Cross and being, like I said, first as a volunteer, now as a staff, is the flexibility and adaptability that seems to, every time you think you have it figured out, there's something else, and you just sort of like adapt to it. So COVID was definitely an experience for all of us. Yes, there were volunteers. We couldn't have people into the office, but our program still continued. So you had people, the disasters still supporting disasters. So we had to follow all the guidelines for protection. There are volunteers that did not want to be a part of it, but then there are ones that still wanted to respond to the home fires and stuff like that. But we took all the necessary precautions with the mask and the gloves. And when there was a disaster where we had to open shelters, we were putting people in hotels instead of the open shelter that we would have done to do that. As far as the services to the armed forces, we were still supporting the VAs and different organizations. So if I would bring supplies to the VA, Montrose VA, the Bronx VA, whichever VA, and I was delivering stuff in the parking lot with mask and gloves on, because we weren't allowed into the facilities. So yes, it was very adaptable. We did have to make major adjustments, and we also learned a lot that we could do using this live stream. Or so a lot of work we were able to do a lot of our trainings, our resiliency type workshops for veterans and active duty via like Teams or Zoom. We did a lot of training online. So it kind of put us in a situation where we adapted, but we also grew in different ways, so that we learned another way of adjusting, or in addition to the in-person, we could still impact through use of technology as well.
Yeah, that's a common question we ask, and I'm sure that it's a great way to communicate with veterans, because we talk a lot about some of the good things that came out of COVID, and certainly with our seniors in the town, no one was coming to our programs. We weren't running them. It was, everybody was kind of became homebound.
Right.
But, we learned this wonderful technology, being able to do things virtually. Has that then also become a big part of the American Red Cross and also the veterans overseas, the use of Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
can talk a
Teams.
little bit about that. And
Yeah, no, we do. Like when I was deployed, we did a resiliency workshop. So I was in Romania. To get a volunteer resiliency worker who is a licensed therapist to do the training. She was in Italy. So we have, to schedule it. So using Zoom, I had a therapist from
Right.
Italy doing this resiliency workshop in Romania, which was pretty awesome. And the team members in the United States was able to view it as well. So it was wonderful. And the best part of the technology to me was like me being away from home for so long. I was able to communicate with my children every day. Of course, I had to be up at like 1 or 2 in the morning to talk to them, but
Right.
at least I still was able to video chat with them and stay present in their lives, which was a blessing to me.
That's such a major difference with older veterans. You didn't have that luxury, really. Like particularly like World War II, they could have been gone for years, maybe with one letter here and there.
Right.
But the ability to communicate in today's world has negatives, but it has a lot of pluses also.
Absolutely.
It's strange. Like COVID, we talk about it, and in my mind, it's almost like it never happened. Like it's like it just seems to like you push it away, and now we're sitting here looking at each other talking, which we never would have done if
Right.
COVID never showed up. Um, you know, so resiliency, I guess, is the word that you used a number of times.
Yes.
You need it in life, period.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's one of our focus for our military community is teaching them the resiliency.
John,
And it's,
I'm just connecting the dots. You've been to some advisory committee meetings for Project Independence.
Yes.
Now that I remember, when they're, I get, there's at those kinds of meetings, I guess the people who are there are not really the veterans. Unfortunately, most of the people who are there are women, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but there's not too many men at that meeting. So the veterans would have to be somebody either. Now that's a question I have for you. Do spouses of veterans, like a lot of women were spouses of veterans, are they eligible to get support for this type of thing?
Absolutely. We do a lot of work with Blue Star families. And yes, our services are available to family members of active duty and veterans.
Is it like a caretaker kind of?
Yeah, that's one aspect of it. Yes.
Right.
But, if they have questions or they need to help, with tapping into some of those community resources, we would do that as well.
So you're very much a lot like Project Independence in a sense that Project Independence is not necessarily doing some of these things, but they have partners that they send you to
Right.
to help whatever your problem is, which is worth its weight in gold, because otherwise you're going to spend weeks researching and trying to find out where to go.
Right.
In my 3 years of supporting service to the armed forces, there are so many organizations that want to help. There's so many people that want to support our military community, but there seems to be a disconnect. And one of my goals is to bridge some of those disconnect, where we should all be able to rely on each other to support whatever the need of the military service member is at that time. So John and I work, I mean, we work hard in Long Island. I cover the other, boroughs and, upstate as well, to try to bridge. It's like, how do we get into one network where if there is a need, we can pick up the phone and say, hey, is there anything, or do you know anyone who can help this family member or this veteran who needs, some help with finding a place to stay or some furniture, something like that. So that's one of my goals, is to make that gap smaller and create stronger connections within all these community resource agencies.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do at Project Independence, because the last thing you want to do is duplicate services when there's something right there that can do it. So partnerships are so important. Absolutely. And and you have to kind of understand the resources in your own area too, because something, where we are in North Hempstead, we have a lot of wonderful resources. We have, the hospital systems, and we're close to the city. And, there's just so much at our fingertips. And if you go a little further out east, you have a lot more distance and things like that. So to really understand your area's resources is great, because, again, not duplicating services. So, you're going to be our partner now. So this is, not that you haven't been, but it makes so much sense that, we can kind of work together and
absolutely.
Funnel services through us and our veterans in the town of North Hempstead and our advisories, and working strongly with our veterans caseworker would be wonderful.
Now, you also would work, I would think, closely with the VA, like, try to facilitate with each other.
Yes, we support all, with 6 of them, 6 of the VAs. Yes, we do. Slowly, we're starting to be allowed back into the VA. So Friday, just as an example, we partnered with a company that wanted to do something for the Bronx VA. And going through the process, we were actually allowed into the nursing home part of the VA to provide a meal for the veterans that were there. And it meant so much to me personally, because, for the last 3 years, I'm in a mask and delivering stuff in a parking lot or the receiving end. So to actually go in there and hand the veteran a meal, give them a hug and talk, have a conversation, I was like, this is why I do what I do, because it just meant so much, that human interaction. Technology is wonderful, but to actually sit there and talk to them and have a conversation, listen to their stories, and for them to just feel heard, I think it's so important. And that's one of the things we do within the hospitals, is provide all these, like, call it Snacks and Smile. We have a coffee cart. Those are all things we did prior to COVID. So slowly we're going to get back into, as we're allowed back into the VAs, then those are the types of services. I want to get the pet therapy into the homes. They do it. They're up at West Point and Teller Hospital right now. They're allowed up there, but not all the VAs are able to let us in just yet, but we're getting closer.
Okay.
I was involved very on the edge with Soldiers at Home, and mainly that's an organization that tries to support veterans with pet dogs, basically service dogs. And there are a lot of people out there trying to help. But like, that's the type of organization I would think you would want to try to have as a partner, so you could direct people there. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know enough about them. I was there strictly on a golf outing that they had for fundraising. But they did have a couple of veterans there with dogs, and it was they were very appreciative.
So thanks, Otto. Unfortunately, we need to go to a break. This is the end of Project Independence New Community Talk Radio. We've been talking with the American Red Cross Service to the Armed Forces, the Hero Care Network, with Lallita Maharaj, the International Service Manager, and John McGuire, a veteran, also a volunteer. We'd like to thank you both very much for coming on. I'm sure you will be asked again to join us, along with any other programming you could do for our Department of Services for the Aging. You're listening to Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio.